The air in Ming Qiongnu's bedroom was thick with the scent of antique wood and expensive floral arrangements. A cloying sweetness that did little to mask the tension. She lay on silk sheets, her skin unnaturally pale against the deep emerald fabric. A fragile porcelain doll in a vast, gilded cage. Her father, Mr. Mang, paced relentlessly at the foot of her bed, his tailored suit creased from hours of anxious movement. At her side, a man in simple, worn clothes worked with a focus that silenced the room. His name was Non Lin Fong, though the family's staff had taken to calling him the Divine Doctor. With hands that were impossibly steady, he inserted tin, silver acupuncture needles into Qiongnu's skin, each movement precise, economical, and imbued with an ancient grace that felt utterly out of place in the hypermodern mansion. He was the family's last resort, a wandering healer spoken of in hushed, reverent tones, summoned after every specialist in the city had failed to diagnose the sudden ailment that had stolen Qiongnu's consciousness. As Non Lin Fong drew the final needle from her temple, a faint blush of pink returned to Qiongnu's cheeks. He straightened up, his expression unreadable. Mr. Mang rushed forward, his voice a choked whisper. Is she? Before Non Lin Fong could answer, Qiongnu's eyelids fluttered. Her father let out a ragged sob of relief, collapsing into a chair beside her bed. Heavens, Divine Doctor, you are truly a miracle worker, he exclaimed, his eyes wide with awe. Just moments ago, she was completely unresponsive. Now she looks as if she merely had a nap. Qiongnu's vision swam into focus. The first thing she saw was her father's tear-streaked face, etched with a relief so profound it looked like pain. The second was the stranger standing behind him, a man whose calm demeanor felt like an anchor in the swirling chaos of her mind. Father, she murmured, her voice raspy. What happened? You collapsed, my dear. Overwork, Mr. Mang said, clutching her hand. He turned back to the doctor, his admiration spilling over into frantic deference. Divine Doctor, your skill is unparalleled. I have admired your legendary reputation for years. Please, I beg of you, take me as your disciple. Non Lin Fong offered a slight, almost imperceptible bow, his humility a stark contrast to the ostentatious room. Mr. Mang, you are too kind. How dare I, a mere wandering doctor, take the distinguished head of the Ming family as a disciple? He paused, his gaze shifting to Qiongnu. It was a look of professional assessment. Yet, there was something deeper in his eyes, a current of knowing that sent a strange shiver through her. However, I can see that Miss Ming has been overworking herself for a very long time. Her constitution is delicate. If you would permit it, I would like to apply for the position of her personal bodyguard. The request hung in the air, bizarre and unexpected. Qiongnu pushed herself up on her elbows, a frown creasing her brow. A bodyguard, she protested, a voice gaining strength. Father, that's absurd. He's a doctor, not security. There's something strange about him. But her father, blinded by gratitude and fear, was already nodding vigorously. An excellent idea. Perfect. Your safety is my utmost priority, Qiongnu. Consider it done. He sealed the arrangement with a firm nod, completely overriding her objection. It was a familiar pattern, her well-being decided for her, her voice a mere suggestion to be dismissed. As her father began discussing salary, Qiongnu stared at the man, who was now, inexplicably, her shadow. His features were plain, but well-defined, and his eyes held a depth that felt ancient. It was then that a fragmented memory surfaced, the scent of rain on asphalt, the screech of tires, and this same calm face leaning over her after pulling her from the path of a speeding car years ago. It had been a blur, a fleeting moment of terror and salvation she had long since filed away as an anonymous act of kindness. A breath hitched. It's you, she whispered, the realization dawning with shocking clarity. The men stopped talking and turned to her. "You're the one who saved me. My great benefactor, I've been trying to find you for years." A flicker of a smile touched Non Lin Feng's lips. It was small, but it transformed his face, hinting at the powerful man beneath the humble facade. Her father beamed, clapping his hands together. "You see, it's fate. It is absolutely fate." Later that evening, the oppressive atmosphere had migrated from the sick room to the grand living room. The relief of Qiangyu's recovery had evaporated, replaced by the familiar chill of familial duty. Her grandmother, the stern and unyielding matriarch of the Ming family, stood before her, holding a shimmering slip of fabric that was more suggestion than dress. "You will wear this to the banquet tonight," she declared, her voice leaving no room for argument. Qiangyu recalled as if the gown were poison. It was a scandalous creation of silver sequins and sheer panels, designed to cling and reveal. "Grandma, this dress shows everything. You might as well ask me to wear a bikini," she argued, her jaw tight. "I will not be paraded around for Liang Xin." Her cousin, Mang Yuan, who was lounging on a velvet chaise, let out a disdainful laugh. "Don't be so dramatic, Xiangyu. You should be grateful Master Liang is willing to be your escort. Without him, the Ming family wouldn't even have the qualifications to receive an invitation to an event of this caliber." The insult was designed to sting, and it did. But it was her grandmother's next words that felt like a vice tightening around her heart. "Your position as CEO is contingent on the Liang family's continued investment," the old woman said, her eyes as cold as jade. "If you do not attend this cocktail party with their son, you can forget about ever sitting in that office again." The threat hung in the air, suffocating her ambition or her dignity. The choice was a cruel one, and she could feel her resolve beginning to crumble under the immense weight of her family's expectations. Just as the silence stretched to a breaking point, a figure stepped forward from the shadows near the doorway. It was Non Lin Feng, dressed in the same simple clothes. He was an island of calm in the churning sea of their family drama. He said nothing, but his presence was a statement. He stood near her, a silent, steady ally. Seeing him, a sudden, wild spark of rebellion ignited within Qiangyu. She had an out. It was impulsive, reckless, and utterly insane, but it was hers. She straightened her spine and looked her grandmother dead in the eye. "I would rather die than wear that dress and go to that party with Liang Xin." Then she turned, strode across the marble floor, and defiantly took Non Lin Feng's arm. His muscles were firm beneath her hand. "I'm going with him." A collective gasp filled the room. Mang Yuan shot up from the chaise, her face a mask of disbelief. "With that little beggar?" she shrieked. Qiangyu's grip on his arm tightened, using their insult as her shield. "Yes, with the little beggar." Non Lin Feng didn't even flinch. He looked down at Qiangyu, and his voice, when he spoke, was low and deeply reassuring. Meant only for her. "Goddess, don't worry." The name was so unexpected, so respectful in a house where she was only ever a pawn, that it sent a jolt through her. "I will definitely get you into the cocktail party." He then raised his voice slightly to address the stunned room. "But first, we're going to the mall." Without a backward glance, he guided her toward the grand doors, leaving the spluttering, furious Ming family in their wake. The air inside Ding Hua Mall was different, chilled, sterile, and smelling faintly of money and expensive perfume. It was a world away from the dusty streets and warm, flower-scented air of the noodle shop where Non Lin Feng usually felt most at home. For Qiangyu, it was a gilded cage she knew all too well. Yet standing beside him, she felt like an intruder. Polished marble floors reflected the recessed lighting like a still, dark lake, and the silence between storefronts was heavy with unspoken rules of class and wealth. Non Lin Feng, however, was an island of calm in the opulent sea. He held the glass door to the flagship Armani boutique for her, his gesture as natural as if he were holding open the door to his modest apartment. "After you," he said, his voice a low, steady anchor. As they stepped inside, a curious sight greeted them. A line of staff, ramrods straight in their sharp black uniforms, flanked the entrance. Their smiles were identical, practiced, polite and predatory. They were waiting for someone. An internal memo had circulated just an hour prior. A VIP of unimaginable stature was arriving, and any misstep would mean immediate termination. The store manager, a man whose ambition gleamed brighter than his polished shoes, scanned the mall entrance with hawk-like intensity. Before Chiang-yu could process the strange reception, two voices, sharp and laced with venom, sliced through the quiet. Well, look what the sewer washed in." Chiang-yu's spine went rigid. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. Liang Xin, her cousin, strode in with his perpetual sneer. His girlfriend, Mang Yuan, clinging to his arm like a designer parasite. They stopped short, their eyes fixing on Non-Lin Fong with theatrical disgust. "A stinky beggar," Liang Xin barked, his voice loud enough for half the store to hear. "In Armani. Who let you in? Security." He looked around, indignant. "Get out now. You're polluting the air." Heat flooded Chiang-yu's face, a painful, prickling wave of shame and anger. Every eye in the store was now on them. The polite smiles of the staff had curdled into masks of confusion and contempt. This was the world she was trying to escape, a world where a person's worth was measured by the label on their shirt. Mang Yuan detached herself from Liang Xin's arm and sauntered forward, her laughter like tinkling, broken glass. She looked Chiang-yu up and down, her gaze lingering on Non-Lin Fong with open disdain. "Chiang-yu, darling, don't tell me you came with this," she purred, gesturing vaguely at him. "You can't honestly believe this piece of trash can get you into the Starlight Gala, can you? Did he promise to sneak you in through the kitchen?" Chiang-yu's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "That's enough, Mang Yuan." But Non-Lin Fong simply smiled, a disarmingly placid expression. He ignored them completely, his gaze sweeping over the waiting staff. "I believe you were expecting me," he said, his voice calm and clear. "I'm the VIP you were notified about." A beat of stunned silence, then a ripple of derisive snorts. Liang Xin threw his head back and roared with laughter. "You, the VIP? Do you even know what that word means?" The store manager, seeing Liang Xin's expensive watch and smug, entitled air, rushed forward, bowing obsequiously. "Mr. Liang, of course, we've been expecting you. Please, allow me to show you our new private collection." He shot a venomous glare at Non-Lin Fong. "Security, remove this man. He is disturbing our honored guest." Two burly guards started forward, but Non-Lin Fong didn't even glance at them. He walked past the fawning manager and straight to a mannequin displaying the centerpiece of the new collection. A tailored, midnight blue suit woven with what looked like threads of silver. He ran a hand over the fabric. "I'll take this," he announced. Then he pointed to a nearby display. "And that watch? And the shoes?" The manager paused, his face a mask of confusion. A junior sales associate, eager to intervene, hurried over. "Sir, that outfit is a limited edition masterpiece. The total price is 20 million. She said the number with a certain reverence, a sum meant to intimidate, to put people like him back in their place. Mang Yuan shrieked with laughter. 20 million, is he insane? Chiang-yu, you're not just consorting with beggars now. You're keeping a gigolo. And a delusional one at that. The insult hit Chiang-yu harder than a slap. Her vision swam with fury, but before she could speak, Non-Lin Fong reached into the pocket of his simple jacket and pulled out a wallet. From it, He produced a card. It was stark and elegant solid black, matte, with a single, intricately engraved silver dragon called in the center. He handed it to the stunned sales associate. "Charge it," he said simply. Mang Yuan peered at the card. The dragon's sword gold card. "Please. Those are mythological. Yours must be a cheap fake you bought online." Liang Xin stepped forward, his eyes glittering with malicious glee. He saw an opportunity for ultimate humiliation. "I'll make you a bet. You pathetic worm." He sneered, loud enough for the growing crowd of onlookers to hear. "If that crappy piece of plastic can actually swipe for 20 million, I'll get on my knees right here and call you Grandpa." The sales associate, under the manager's furious glare, took the card with trembling fingers. She looked from Non Lin Feng's calm face to Liang Xin's smug grin and swiped it through the portable machine. Beep beep beep, the screen flashed red. "Transaction deny." A triumphant cackle erupted from Liang Xin. "Grandpa, I don't think so. Get him out. Throw this con artist and his fake card into the street." Mang Yuan clapped her hands in delight, her face a perfect portrait of vindictive pleasure. Qiang Yu's heart plummeted into her stomach. The public failure a cold, heavy stone. She felt dizzy with humiliation. But just as the guards reached for Non Lin Feng's arms, the store manager, who had gotten a closer look at the card in the associate's hand, went white. His eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror. He shoved the guards back with a frantic energy that defied his polished demeanor. "Stop! Don't touch him!" he shrieked, his voice cracking. He stumbled forward and bowed a deep, 90-degree bow of utter deference, his forehead nearly touching his knees. His entire body trembled. "My deepest apologies, sir. I am a blind, ignorant fool." Liang Xin's smile vanished. "What are you doing? He's a fraud." The manager didn't even look at him. He remained bowed, his voice shaking as he spoke to the floor. That is the legendary Dragon Sword Gold card. It is issued to only the direct members of the Sha family." He finally dared to look up at Non Lin Feng, his face awash with a mixture of terror and awe. "It can't be swiped," the manager whispered, the words hanging in the now silent store like a death sentence for Liang Xin's pride. He swallowed hard. "The transaction was denied because the amount is too huge. A small suit worth a mere 20 million is not worthy of this card's verification." The grand ballroom of the Intercontinental was a galaxy of glittering crystal and ambition. Beneath chandeliers that dripped like frozen waterfalls, Ming Qiangyu moved with a newfound confidence, felt as elegant as the silk of her gown. The air, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the low hum of corporate negotiations, vibrated with her success. Moments ago, she had shaken hands with the chairman of the Jing Group, the final word sealing a collaboration that would not only stabilize her company, but propel it to new heights. For the first time in months, she felt the suffocating weight of her family's expectations lift, replaced by the pure, exhilarating lightness of triumph. A soft voice, laced with an unfamiliar sweetness, cut through her moment of reprieve. "Qiangyu, sister." "Congratulations." Qiangyu turned to find her cousin, Mang Yuan, standing before her, a flute of champagne extended in a gesture of peace. Her smile was immaculate, a perfect, practiced curve, but it never quite reached the cool calculation in her eyes. For a lifetime, Qiangyu had learned to brace for the sting that followed that smile, the subtle dig hidden within a compliment, the poison coating every pretty word. Tonight, however, Mang Yuan's expression seemed different, softer, tinged with what looked like genuine remorse. "I know I haven't been fair to you," Mang Yuan continued, her voice a low, convincing murmur. "Seeing you succeed tonight, I'm truly proud. Can you forgive me?" The plea caught Qiangyu off guard. Every instinct, honed by years of backstabbing and betrayal, screamed caution. But the victory was intoxicating. The champagne bubbles rising in the glass were mesmerizing, and a desperate, weary part of her yearned for a truce. Perhaps this success was enough to finally change things. Maybe this time, the olive branch wasn't hiding a viper. Of course, Chiang-yu replied, her own smile a bit fragile as she accepted the glass. The champagne was crisp and cold against her lips. As she drank, she missed the flicker of a cruel, triumphant smile that finally touched Mang Yuan's eyes before vanishing. You must be exhausted, Mang Yuan said, her concern now feeling cloying. She discreetly pressed a hotel key card into Chiang-yu's hand. I booked room 305 upstairs for you, sis. If you get tired of the nose, you can go rest. My little gift to you. Chiang-yu nodded, a wave of gratitude washing over her, clouding her judgment. It felt like a genuine act of kindness. But as Mang Yuan stepped back into the crowd, a strange, syrupy warmth began to spread through Chiang-yu's limbs. The brilliant chandeliers above started to blur, their light smearing into soft, hazy comets. A sudden vertigo tilted the polished floor beneath her feet. The room's confident hum dissolved into a discordant buzz in her ears. Something was wrong. The champagne. Across the ballroom, leaning against a marble column, Non Lin Feng's placid expression hardened. He had seen the whole exchange. He'd seen Mang Yuan's predatory focus, the subtle signal she gave to the lecherous Liang Xin lurking near the bar, and the unnerving speed with which Chiang-yu's posture had changed after that single drink. The flicker of suspicion in his eyes ignited into a cold, protective fury. If you'll excuse me, Chiang-yu murmured to a nearby acquaintance, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. I need the restroom. She used the excuse as a shield, desperate to escape the prying eyes and the suffocating feeling that the walls were closing in. Her path towards the elevators was a clumsy, wavering line. Each step was an act of will, her mind struggling to pierce the thick fog that was rapidly descending. The key card for room 305 felt heavy and cold in her palm, a promise of refuge. The hallway upstairs was a silent, distorted tunnel. Finally fumbling the key into the lock, she pushed the door open and practically fell inside. The room was dark, lit only by the city glow filtering through the shears. She didn't bother with the lights. Her only thought was the bed, a large, shadowy shape in the center of the room. She stumbled towards it, her legs giving out as she collapsed onto the plush duvet, the world dissolving into a spinning, helpless darkness. She fought to keep her eyes open, to cling to a sliver of consciousness, but the sedative was a leaden blanket, dragging her under. A soft click echoed in the quiet room, the sound of the lock sliding home. Chiang-yu's heart hammered against her ribs. She forced her heavy eyelids open to see a silhouette detaching itself from the doorway. A predatory grin split the face of Liang Xin as he advanced into the room, shrugging off his jacket. His eyes roamed over her prone form with a sickening possessiveness. He was a wolf, and she was the lamb, delivered and trapped. Just as his hand reached for the silk of her dress, the door didn't open, it exploded. A deafening crack splintered the frame as Non Lin Feng burst through, his face a mask of cold, lethal intent. Liang Xin spun around, shock and fear warring on his face, but he had no time to react. In a blur of motion, Non Lin Feng seized his outstretched arm, twisted it at an unnatural angle with a sickening pop, and drove a knee into his stomach. Liang Xin crumpled, gasping, only to be hauled up by his collar and thrown against the wall with a force that made the art rattle. He slid to the floor, a discarded ragdoll. The commotion brought Mang Yuan to the doorway, her face a picture of feigned concern that curdled into pure shock when she saw Non Lin Feng standing over a groaning Liang Xin. She had expected to find a ruined Chiang-yu. Not this. From the bed, Chiang-yu pushed herself up on trembling elbows, the terrifying clarity of the plot cutting through the drug's haze. Her voice was a raw, trembling whisper, but it carried the weight of a final, shattered hope. Mushin, she said, using her cousin's given name like a shard of glass. You did this. You planned all of this. Mang Yuan's face went pale. Before she could stammer out a denial, Non Lin Feng spoke, his voice dangerously calm and devoid of all warmth. "I don't care about your disgusting hobbies," he said, his gaze sweeping over both Mang Yuan and the whimpering Liang Xin. "Now, get out." It wasn't a request. It was an eviction from a higher authority they dared not question. Scrambling, Liang Xin helped himself up and fled with Mang Yuan, who cast one last look of venomous hatred at Qiangyu before disappearing. The silence that descended was absolute. The adrenaline faded, leaving Qiangyu disoriented and shaking, the true horror of what almost happened crashing down on her. Non Lin Feng was by her side in an instant. He said nothing, simply sat on the edge of the bed, his presence a solid, unwavering anchor in her spinning world. Qiangyu leaned into him, burying her face in the rough fabric of his jacket, and wrapped her arms around him in a desperate, clinging hug. The steady, strong beat of his heart against her ear was the only sound that mattered, a rhythm of safety that slowly, mercifully, began to chase the terror away. The grand opening of Jin Yuji was the pinnacle of societal events, a gilded affair where the air itself seemed to shimmer with wealth and influence. Champagne flowed like water, and the murmur of polite conversation was a symphony of power brokers and old money. The sacred grounds, usually reserved for solemn worship, were today a stage for the elite, a vibrant celebration of prosperity. Then, the heavy, ornate gates groaned open, not for another limousine, but for a single man. Non Lin Feng walked through the crowd, his face a mask of cold resolve. The celebratory music faltered and died. On his back, he carried a simple, unvarnished wooden coffin. The stark, somber reality of it cleaved through the opulence, silencing the chatter and freezing champagne flutes mid-air. He moved with a funereal grace, each step deliberate, until he reached the center of the grand courtyard. With a heavy, resonant thud, he set the coffin down before the assembly. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud, but it carried across the stunned silence with the chilling clarity of a funeral bell. He placed a hand on the rough wood. "Grandfather," he announced, his gaze sweeping over the bewildered faces, "your grandson has finally found the culprit who slandered you. Today you can finally rest in peace." A wave of confusion and outrage rippled through the guests. Whispers turned to hisses. From the crowd, a woman in a couture gown stepped forward, her face twisted in a venomous sneer. It was his ex-wife, clinging to the arm of the Zhang family's heir. "Non Lin Feng, have you lost your mind?" she spat, "bringing the coffin of a traitor to the sacred place. Jin Yuji is no place for the disgraced." Her partner chimed in, his voice slick with contempt. "His grandfather was a stain on our city's history. Security, remove this lunatic and his baggage." The crowd, easily swayed, began to shout their agreement. The air grew volatile, a mob mentality taking hold. Non Lin Feng stood his ground, a lone island against a tide of scorn, his expression unyielding. Just as the security guards began to advance, a sudden, unnatural wind swept through the courtyard, extinguishing decorative torches and making silk dresses whip violently. The sky above seemed to darken. Every head turned towards the entrance, where a woman stood, cloaked in an aura of such profound authority that the world seemed to bend around her. It was the Nine Luminaries goddess, Non Lin Feng's junior sister, her presence commanding an immediate, instinctual reverence. The most powerful figures in the room gasped, their arrogance vanishing, replaced by a deep, primal fear. Many bowed their heads. Some nearly fell to their knees. She glided forward, her eyes like chips of ice fixed on the Zhang air. Her voice was quiet, yet it boomed in the sudden, absolute silence. "Dare to slander my master," she declared, each word a shard of glass. "He deserves to die." The statement hung in the air, an undeniable truth delivered by a divine arbiter. The word master confirmed everything. Non Lin Feng's grandfather was no traitor. He was the mentor of a living deity. The collective shame of the crowd was a palpable force. Non Lin Feng nodded once to his junior sister before turning his attention back to the assembly. He produced a small projector, and with a click, screen lit up behind him. A cascade of irrefutable evidence filled the air. Bank records showing massive transfers from the Zhang family to corrupt officials, forged documents bearing the Zhang family seal, and finally, a grainy video of the Zhang patriarch himself, drunkenly boasting of how he framed his old rival to seize power. The Zhang heir and his family, who were present, turned ash white, their social masks crumbling to dust. The crowd murmured, the sound now one of awe and repentance. They had scorned a hero and celebrated his executioners. As the evidence concluded, Non Lin Feng gave a final, respectful nod to the assembly, a silent dismissal. Without another word, he hoisted the coffin back onto his shoulder. The weight was no longer just wood and remains. It was the restored honor of his family. He walked away, leaving a world of shattered reputations and whispered apologies in his wake. While one fire was being extinguished, another raged at the Ming family mansion. The atmosphere was thick with fury. A television in the corner blared news reports of a sudden, catastrophic crisis at the Ming Group. Its stock had plummeted, wiping out billions in value in a matter of hours. The cause: a vicious online smear campaign. A storm of fabricated gossip targeting Ming Qiangyu's personal life and professional integrity. Useless. Absolutely useless, Grandma Ming shrieked, her voice cracking as she slammed her cane on the marble floor. Her face was a prune of rage, her eyes fixed on Qiangyu, who stood pale and silent, bearing the brunt of the storm. Look what you've done. Your personal scandals have ruined this family. You have dragged the Ming name through the mud. Her cousins, smug and victorious, added their own poison. We told you she couldn't handle it, Grandma. She's a disgrace. Qiangyu felt the walls closing in. The accusations, the hatred, the sudden collapse of everything she had worked for, it was an unbearable weight. Through the cacophony, Non Lin Feng stepped forward. He had arrived just moments before, his expression calm, as if he were merely walking into a quiet library. He ignored the family's hysterical tirade, his focus solely on Qiangyu. Seeing the despair in her eyes, he simply pulled out his phone. He made a discreet call, his voice low but laced with an undeniable command that cut through the nose. Yuan, he said, his tone flat and dangerously calm. I'll give you 5 minutes. Solve the crisis for the Ming Group. He paused, his eyes still on Qiangyu, and send the biggest new development project from the Shao Corporation to the Ming family. Make sure the contract is addressed only to CEO Ming Qiangyu. Grandma Ming scoffed. Who are you calling? The president. Stop your pathetic posturing. Less than 5 minutes later, the doorbell chimed. A woman in a razor-sharp business suit stood at the door, flanked by a team of assistants carrying briefcases. It was Secretary Yuan, Non Lin Feng's junior sister. Now in her corporate guise, her presence radiated competence and power, silencing the room instantly. She bypassed the gawking family members and addressed Qiangyu's cackling cousins directly. Your positions have been terminated, effective immediately, she stated, her voice devoid of emotion. The Shao Corporation will be investing 10 billion into the Ming Group, contingent on one non-negotiable term. She turned, her gaze softening slightly as she looked at Qiangyu, and offered a thick portfolio. We will only deal with CEO Ming Qiangyu. The Ming family watched in stunned, gaping silence. The Shao Corporation was a titan, a mythical giant in their industry. An investment from them wasn't just a lifeline. It was an ascension. On a nearby tablet, the Ming Group's stock chart, previously a catastrophic nosedive, reversed its course, rocketing upward with impossible speed. Xiangyu stood frozen, the heavy contract in her hands. Her mind was reeling. The man who had faced down an entire assembly of elites, the man who had vindicated his grandfather's name, was the same man who had just saved her company with a single phone call. He wasn't just a kind, humble protector. He was an emperor hiding in plain sight. Overwhelmed, she turned her questioning eyes to Non Lin Feng. For the first time, she saw the quiet, immense, and terrifying power he wielded so effortlessly. All of it directed at shielding her from the world. He was her steadfast protector, and he was also so much more. And in that dizzying, world-altering moment, she knew nothing would ever be the same. The first rays of dawn sliced through the vertical blinds of the CEO's office, painting the room in stripes of gold and shadow. The sterile, corporate air of the Ming Group headquarters felt different this morning, lighter, cleansed. For the first time in her life, Ming Qiangyu sat behind her sprawling mahogany desk, not as a warrior bracing for the next attack, but as a victor surveying a peaceful kingdom. Across from her, Non Lin Feng stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his silhouette framed against the awakening city. He wasn't dressed in the simple, unassuming clothes she had first known him in, but in a tailored suit that spoke of quiet power. He had shed his disguise, yet he was still the same man who had shielded her from rain with a flimsy umbrella, the same man who had calmly faced down her entire, venomous family. The events of the previous night played in her mind like a fever dream. The emergency board meeting, the irrefutable evidence of Mang Yuan's embezzlement laid bare, her grandmother Liang Xin's face contorting in disbelief and fury as her authority crumbled to dust. And through it all, Non Lin Feng had been there, not as a humble assistant, but as the orchestrator of justice, the silent guardian who had finally revealed the devastating scope of his influence. The Non family, the legendary healers and innovators, had thrown their weight behind her, and the Ming family's petty dynasty had shattered against their impenetrable shield. She watched him now, a man who could command armies of industry with a single phone call, calmly observing the morning traffic. He had done all of this for her. The sheer scale of it was breathtaking. "You're still here," she said, her voice soft, breaking the tranquil silence. He turned from the window, his gaze finding hers. It was warm, steady, and held no trace of the immense power he wielded. It was simply the gaze of a man looking at the woman he loved. "I'm not going anywhere." Qiangyu shook her head slowly, a faint, incredulous smile touching her lips. "What I did, the things my family put you through, I didn't scare you away." She finally voiced the fear that had lingered in the back of her mind. "After everything you saw, the ugliness of it all, you stayed." He walked towards her desk, his steps silent and sure. He stopped before her, his presence a comforting warmth that seemed to push back the morning chill. "Qiangyu," he began, his voice a low, soothing balm, "there is nothing about you that could ever scare me away. Don't you know that by now?" She looked down at her hands, clasped on the desk. All her life, she had been taught that attachments were weaknesses. Her grandmother had drilled into her that trust was a currency you never spent. Yet this man had given her everything and asked for nothing. He had trusted her when her own blood had not. "You won't have any trouble," she murmured, more to herself than to him. The words felt inadequate, flimsy. She was acknowledging the truth. Being with her, the beleaguered CEO of a company he could buy and sell 100 times over, was no longer a liability for him. He had cleared his family's name, settled his own scores, and in doing so, had secured her future. He was free. He could go anywhere, be with anyone. "The only trouble I would have," he said gently, "is a life without you in it." Her head snapped up. He reached across the desk, not to touch a document or a piece of technology, but to gently cup her cheek. His thumb stroked her skin, and every wall she had ever built, every piece of armor she had ever worn, began to dissolve under his touch. "Xiangyu," he asked, his voice earnest, his eyes holding hers with a tender, hopeful light. "Would you let me always stay with you?" It wasn't a question of contracts or alliances. It wasn't a business proposal. It was a question about forever. He was the non-family's sign, the hidden dragon of the medical world, and he was asking for her permission to remain by her side. He was giving her all the power. The stoic mask of CEO Ming, the ice queen who had fought tooth and nail for her position, finally cracked. A single tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek, and was immediately caught by his thumb. She leaned into his touch, a silent surrender. The lingering bitterness she held for Mang Yuan, the deep-seated resentment toward Liang Xin, it all seemed to evaporate in that moment. They were ghosts, distant memories from a life that was no longer hers. Their defeat wasn't her victory. This, right here, was a genuine smile, small and fragile but brighter than the morning sun, graced her lips. She raised her hand and placed it over his, pressing his palm more firmly against her face. "Yes," she whispered. The word was a breath, an oath, an unlocking of her own heart. "Yes." Relief and a profound joy washed over his features. He moved around the desk and gently pulled her to her feet. The last vestiges of the corporate world fell away as she stepped into his embrace. "It's all over from last night," he murmured into her hair, his arms wrapped securely around her. "Mang Yuan is facing a full investigation. The evidence is overwhelming. Your grandmother has been stripped of all her shares and voting rights by the board. I have no power over you anymore." No wonder. She closed her eyes, sinking into the feeling of absolute safety. It was a foreign sensation, yet it felt like coming home. She wasn't just Xiangyu, the CEO. She was just Xiangyu, and she was loved. They stood there for a long moment, a silent promise passing between them, a promise of partnership, of loyalty, of a shared future built not on power or prestige, but on a foundation of unshakable devotion. Later that evening, he took her hand and led her away from the towering Ming Group building. They didn't go to a fancy restaurant or a lavish gala. He took her to the rooftop of his private medical research facility, a quiet, glass-walled garden conservatory that overlooked the entire glittering expanse of the city. The air was cool and smelled of night-blooming jasmine and damp earth. Below them, the city was a sprawling tapestry of light, a universe of stories unfolding in the dark. The Ming Group Tower was just one beacon among millions. They stood by the glass railing, shoulder to shoulder, looking out at their world. "I used to come up here when things were difficult," he said, his voice a quiet confession in the dark. "When I was trying to figure out how to clear my family's name, how to protect what mattered." He turned to her, his hand finding hers, their fingers lacing together perfectly. "Now, I think I'll just come up here to be with you." Xiangyu looked from the breathtaking view to his face, illuminated by the soft glow of the garden lights. The hardship, the struggle, the betrayal, it had all led them here. It had all been worth it. She rested her head on his shoulder, her heart finally, completely at peace. The battle was over. The war was won. And as the city breathed silently below them, their new chapter had just begun.